Glad you're streaming with us. Fireworks on Capitol Hill today as the CEO of the company that makes the popular weight loss drug Ozempic and Wegovy testifies at a Senate hearing.
Senators grilled the Novo Nordisk boss over the high cost of the drugs as the company makes billions in profits. Senate Health Committee Chairman Bernie Sanders certainly didn't pull any punches.
All we are saying, Mr. Jørgensen, is treat the American people the same way that you treat people all over the world. Stop ripping us off.
Senators not the only ones questioning the CEO today. Our Elizabeth Schulze chased him down in the hallway, but he refused to answer her questions.
Mr. Jørgensen, what do you say to people who say you do not have enough answers as to why drugs in the U.S. are so expensive? What's your message to Americans who are paying so much for these drugs that are life-saving? Do you have any plans to lower the price of these drugs in the United States? Any plans to work with lawmakers to try to change the law to make it more accessible to have these drugs?
Elizabeth joining us now from Capitol Hill along with Dr. Mauricio Gonzalez, a specialist in internal and obesity medicine. So, Elizabeth, he didn't want to answer your questions, but he definitely was forced to talk at the hearing today.
He was, and he did answer questions from senators from both sides of the aisle, Kira and Terry, who were giving him a lot of questions about exactly why those drug prices are so much higher in the U.S. than they are in other countries. When you look at the numbers, you could see Bernie Sanders holding up behind. The price of Wegovy, for example, $1,300 plus in the U.S. It's just a fraction of that in other countries like the U.K. and Canada. So the question that was really posed here was, why is the system set up so that Americans do end up paying so much more? And what we did end up hearing a lot from the Novo Nordisk CEO was the fact that there are these middlemen in the pharmaceutical industry that he says are partly to blame for jacking up those prices, that it isn't as easy to negotiate some of those prices in the United States as it might be in other countries. He also did acknowledge, though, that there are systemic failures in the United States that lead to higher costs for Americans, especially those who don't have insurance. And he said he wants to work with senators on that, but of course, perhaps didn't provide exact specifics on what exactly the company would do when it comes to trying to get those costs lower, especially for people who aren't insured.
All right, well done there, Elizabeth. Dr. Mao, the CDC is out with new data showing that U.S. obesity rates are dropping, but they're still up compared to a decade ago, and that wasn't too great back then. A lot of reasons for that, right? Diet, nutrition, lack of exercise, various things. But how critical are these drugs in driving those numbers down, and is it really the silver bullet to solving the problem?
Well, it's not a silver bullet, but it's a huge, huge help for millions of Americans. And there's one concept that we need to understand as a society is that these medications are not weight loss medications. These are anti-obesity medications, and this is a huge difference. We know that obesity is a common link between cancer, cardiovascular disease, and type 2 diabetes. So by treating obesity, obviously with lifestyle, sleep management, stress management, and these medications, we can actually create a lot of good things for Americans.
So, Elizabeth, we heard a lot of strong words from senators from both parties today, but can Congress actually do anything about this, or is this just a lot of talk?
And it's something, it's something we hear a lot when we talk about generally regulating companies. You hear fireworks in these hearings with the CEOs, and then what actually is going to come out of this? Is there going to be legislation? I actually had a chance to talk to Senator Bernie Sanders about, okay, you have this sense at least of some bipartisan agreement that something needs to be done within the system to help lower those costs, but what is it? And is there any momentum to actually get both sides together to pass legislation? He said the next step is to try to target some of those middlemen. So probably sounds to me more like a hearing or questioning of some of those other companies in the industry, but didn't deny that there is a push from both sides of the aisle to try to get together on legislation like this. That said, guys, we've talked about legislation to try to rein in drug costs for years. It has not been comprehensive. There hasn't been anything like that done at the federal level, despite days like this where there is momentum when you see the fireworks. And we talk about the reality of what this does for so many households. And I think it is worth underscoring. We did talk to some patients here who were at the hearing. These drugs have really changed their lives. But they say these are drugs that they're likely going to have to be on for life, so they have to address the affordability issue too.
Dr. Muir, you mentioned the excellent distinction. These aren't people want to lose a little bit of weight. It's for people who are struggling with obesity. And so given that, and what Elizabeth has just told us she heard in the hearing, well, what are some of the long-term benefits but also the risks of these drugs?
No, absolutely. Well, we got to be very thankful, Terry, because now we have excellent prospective data showing that, at least in the SELECT trial, we saw that people with obesity and heart disease, after 4 years, they experience a huge drop in the incidence of new heart disease events by almost 16-20%, which is huge because we have to remember that heart disease is the #1 killer in the United States. Now, there are a couple of trials that I'm personally excited about. One is testing these medications in addiction, mainly alcohol addiction. And there's another trial trying to assess whether or not these medications can help prevent Alzheimer's dementia. We don't have that data yet. We don't have any results. But, retrospective studies are really promising. So, again, these medications obviously will never be the silver bullet for everything. But, again, they can be crucial in the battle of chronic disease in America.
Yeah, and it's changing lives as we speak. I mean, we know so many people that have used this for obesity and even other types of addictions, and it's being hailed a miracle drug among those who are using it and see it effective. But it'll be interesting just to follow the hearing and also how these drugs play out years to come. Elizabeth, Dr. Mao, thank you both so much.
Thank you. It's great.